Invisible Giant. Once upon a time, there was a giant. No one knew just where he had come from or when, but he was as old as the hills, and that's very old. No one had ever seen him, or had even known where he lived. He came and went as he pleased, but he was always invisible. That means no one could see him. Now, I'll tell you all about him, and you try real hard to figure out what his name is. He was a very playful giant and was often up to tricks. He loved to whip clothes right off the clothesline, fling them way into the air, and toss them into a heap on the ground. Another game, which he did enjoy, was picking up big trees by the roots and playing with them as though they were toothpicks, roaring so loudly all the while that people really became quite frightened. The invisible giant liked to play with the ocean, too. He would roll the waves ever so high, then beat them into white foam on the shore. But he wasn't always playing tricks. Oh, no. He was really a very kind-hearted giant, as giants go. A small boy who was once very sick and so hot cried out one day, "If only there were a breath of cool air." Then the big giant felt very sorry for him and swept the cool mountain breezes along through the open window so the small boy could drift off to sleep in comfort. There were some tiny seeds, just babies, on a dried flower. "You'll never grow here," roared the giant tenderly. And he lifted the seed babies ever so gently and carried them to a lovely spot where the soft raindrops came and tucked them into the warm earth for a cozy nap. The little seeds slept until springtime. Then they grew into beautiful flowers. The invisible giant can sing. You've probably heard him whispering through the treetops by your house. Perhaps you've even peeped out to see whether you could see him. If you leave your door open when he's around, he'll come right in. Now, what is this giant's name? Do you know? It's the wind! I wonder whether you guessed before I told you. Did you? Even if you can't see the wind, you know he's there, don't you? And even if you can't see God, you know he's there. He wakes the sun up every morning and makes the stars twinkle at night. He keeps the birds singing their song, and he keeps you strong and happy. Although you can't see God, just like the wind, you know he's always there. That our Father in heaven tells of his love in the book he has given. Wonderful things in the Bible I see. This is the dearest, that Jesus loves me. I am so glad that Jesus loves me. loves me. Yes, he loves me. I am so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves even me. Though I forget him and wander away, still he loves me wherever I stray. Back to his dear loving arms would I flee, when I remember that Jesus loves me. I am so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me. Yes, he loves me. I am so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves even me. Old MacDonald had a farm. I was there one day, so I know. And on this farm he had a visitor, none other than a big black crow, with a caw-caw here and a caw-caw there. This crow was a no-good bird, and as MacDonald whitewashed the chicken coop, a bright idea to the bird occurred. What do you suppose he was going to do? He flopped right into the whitewash pail, 'cause white he decided to be. But as crows are always black, you know, he really was a sight to see. Now old MacDonald had some pigeons. Pigeons are kind of white, you know, and Bad Crow, who was a very cagey old bird, thought that no one would notice him, and that this would be a pretty good opportunity to get in on a free meal. No sooner said than done. Friend Crow flew in with a flock of them and fooled most everyone. But dark clouds hovered overhead and the rain began to fall. And when it washed Crow's paint job off, he wasn't a pigeon at all. Now just remember that, bad old crow. Whether you're big or small, you can fool some people some of the time, but you can't fool God at all. Now, when old MacDonald looks at you, he just sees the outside part. But God sees more than your clothes or face. He sees inside your heart. He sees what you do and he hears what you say. My Lord is watching all the time, 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 time. He sees what you do and he hears what you say. My Lord is watching all the time. He sees what you do and he hears what you say. My Lord is watching all the time, 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 time. He sees what you do and he hears what you say. My Lord is watching all the time, time, time. This is the story of Nothing But a Nothing. Squeaky was a wee mouse with sleek brown fur, lovely deep brown eyes, and a long tail which any mouse would be proud to own. Now, Squeaky should have been the happiest mouse in all of mousedom, But unfortunately he wasn't, because he wanted so much to fly. Of course, as Squeaky had no wings, this was quite a problem. So he wished, and he wished, and wished, and wished as hard as he could. Then what do you suppose happened? You're right. Squeaky was absolutely delighted to discover he had grown a pair of sky blue pink wings. What a marvelous time he had! He soared over flowers, over fences, over treetops, and into the sky above. Now, as Squeaky had a very friendly personality, he soon grew lonesome and began chatting with some fine fat robins. But this is what they said to him. Who ever heard of a fur-covered bird with legs which number 4? And who on a bet saw an animal yet with wings of sky blue pink of pink? With wings of sky blue pink. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, you're nothing but a nothing. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, you're nothing but a nothing. And off they flew, leaving Squeaky in the middle of a loud squeak of protest. Squeaky became very upset. So he tried to make friends with some neighborly-looking black bears. But do you know what they said to him? Who ever heard of a fur-covered bird with legs which number 4? And who on a bet saw an animal yet with wings of sky blue pink of pink? With wings of sky blue pink. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, you're nothing but a nothing. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, you're nothing but a nothing. And off strolled the neighborly-looking black bears. Squeaky was beginning to have regrets about his sky blue pink wings. Soaring through the air can become very tiresome all by oneself, you know. Especially when one isn't sure whether it's an animal or a bird. So at this point, Squeaky decided he would return to his family and live with the mice again. But when his mice friends saw him, I'm sure you know what they said to him. Who ever heard of a fur-covered bird with legs which number 4? And who on a bet saw an animal yet with wings of sky blue pink of pink? With wings of sky blue pink. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, you're nothing but a nothing. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, you're nothing but a nothing. And they ran away. Poor Squeaky, who was a very sorry mouse now, sat down and went, wah! He cried and he cried. I don't want to be nothing but a nothing. Wiping the tears from his mouse-brown eyes, Squeaky wished and wished and wished and wished to be an ordinary mouse again. When his sky blue pink wings disappeared, there wasn't a more thankful mouse in all of mousedom than Squeaky was that day. Now, you probably think Squeaky was a very foolish mouse to wish for wings, don't you? But sometimes even boys and girls become dissatisfied and wish for things God knows are not good for them. God made the animals and the birds as they are because He knows which homes are best for them and whether feathers or fur make the best coat. And God knows what's best for you. That's why He made you as you are. And that's the end of the story of Nothing But a Nothing. Ooh, I almost forgot to tell you. Squeaky lived happily ever after. Wide, wide as the ocean, high as the heavens above, deep, deep as the deepest sea is my Savior's love. I, though so unworthy, still I'm a child of His care, for His word teaches me that His love reaches me Joy bells ringing in your heart, joy bells ringing in your heart. Take the Savior here below with you everywhere you go, and you'll have the joy bells ringing in your heart. Joy bells ringing in your heart, joy bells ringing in your heart. Take the Savior here below with you everywhere you go, and you'll have the joy bells ringing in your heart. Do you know what a shepherd is? Well, he's someone who looks after sheep. Sometimes sheep will wander off and get lost among the rocks and the thorns, so the shepherd watches them very carefully. He sees that they have plenty of nice grass and water. Then in the evening he guides them to their cozy little house, which is called a fold. We need someone to look after us, too. And because the Lord takes care of us every day and watches over us carefully so nothing can harm us, He is our shepherd. Perhaps you can learn to say the 23rd Psalm with me. Would you like to try? It goes like this. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the little tiny babies in his hands. He's got the little tiny babies in his hands. He's got the little tiny babies in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got you and me in his hands. He's got you and me in his hands. He's got you and me in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. You have probably heard of the 3 little kittens who lost their mittens. Well, one of them went to live with his grandmother, you know, and this is what happened to the other 2 who stayed home. 2 little kittens one stormy night began to quarrel and then to fight. One had a mouse, the other had none, and that's the way it had all begun. "I'll have that mouse," said the biggest cat. "You'll have that mouse. We'll see about that." The smallest insisted that he had it first, and soon both kittens were growling their worst. Now, I told you before 'twas a stormy night when these 2 little kittens began to fight. The old woman seized her sweeping broom and swept the kittens right out of the room. The ground was covered with frost and snow, and the 2 little kittens had nowhere to go. So they laid them down on the mat at the door while the old woman finished sweeping the floor. Then in they crept as quiet as mice, all wet with snow and as cold as ice. For they found it was better that stormy night to lie down and sleep than to quarrel and fight. To love one another? I guess they forgot, 'cause otherwise they wouldn't have fought. If the first had given in to the second one, then the quarrel that night would have never begun. Now remember, even if you're in the right, It always takes two to quarrel and fight. Remember the kitten and his wee brother who learned it was best to love one another. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, up in my head, down in my feet. I've got the joy, 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 joy all over me. Glory to his name. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, up in my head, down in my feet. I've got the joy, 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 joy all over me. Glory to his name. The birds up on the treetops sing their song. The angels chant the chorus all day long. The flowers in the garden blend their hues. So why shouldn't you praise him too? The birds up on the treetops sing their song. The angels chant the chorus all day long. The flowers in the garden blend their hues. So why shouldn't you praise him too? Girls like to bake things, don't they? Cynthia did. So one day she borrowed Cook's recipe book and her big checked apron, which went around her twice. But that really didn't matter. Flipping through the book, Cynthia found a cake recipe on page 17. Beside it, Cook had scribbled a little note which said, "Mighty fine." "Now this is just what I'm looking for," said Cynthia. "Today I'll make an extra special mighty fine cake. It will be about the best cake ever, 'cause I'll put everything good into it." However, as she checked the recipe, she discovered some items she didn't like. So she decided to put in only the good things. Sugar, that's good. Let's see. 1 cup and a half. There. Raisins are nice. I'll put some raisins in. Baking powder. That's no good. And who likes salt? Milk. I like milk. Cynthia's extra special mighty fine cake batter looked a wee bit small, so she added a few more good things. 5 fluffy marshmallows and 2 scoops of her favorite strawberry ice cream. Then she mixed it all together and popped it into the oven to bake. "Ooh, I can hardly wait," she said. "What an extra special mighty fine cake it will be." When 35 minutes were finally up, Cynthia flew to the oven. Her cake wasn't even stuck together. Ooh, what a mess. Just then Cook walked in and found Cynthia in tears. "What for is yo all crying, honey child?" she asked. So poor Cynthia poured out the story of her extra special mighty fine cake. "I put everything good into it," she said. "I was sure it would be extra good." "Honey child, I'd say it's a mighty peculiar cake. mighty peculiar. Ain't yo got no flour in it? Flour, said Cynthia. Who likes flour? Did yo all put in a couple eggs? Raw? Asked Cynthia. Why, sure enough, honey child, didn't yo all put in no eggs? Of course not, said Cynthia, stamping her foot. I don't like raw eggs. Cook shook her head slowly and sadly. Puts me in mind of some folks, she said. If they could cook up their own lives, they'd make something mighty peculiar, mighty peculiar. But the good Lord, He sure enough knows what we needs. A little bit of sunshine and some rain clouds too. And we all need some laughter and sometimes tears. Yep, the good Lord, He sure enough knows what's good for folks, even when they don't know theirselves, if they likes it or if they don't likes it. Honey child, why don't you all make another cake? Cynthia followed the recipe very carefully this time. She put everything good into the cake, and even things which she had thought were not good. And when the oven door was opened, ooh, it was beautiful. Honey child, said Cook, I'd say that's a mighty fine cake, mighty fine. Some men have to march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. Some men have to fly over land and sea, but I'm in the Lord's army. I'm in the Lord's army. I'm in the Lord's army. Some men have to march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. Some men have to fly over land and sea, but I'm in the Lord's army. I'm in the Lord's army. Have you decided what you would like to be when you grow up? When you get to be as big as Mommy or Daddy? Maybe you'd like to be a fireman and drive a big fire truck with a siren. Or maybe a doctor, school teacher, perhaps a farmer's wife. And I'm sure some of you want to be soldiers. But you don't have to wait until you grow up to be a soldier. No, you can be a soldier in the Lord's army right now. And do your very best to be a good soldier. Are you getting tired of sitting still? Tell you what, I'll make some music for you, and if you like, you can get right up and march, just like a real soldier in the Lord's army. Ready now? had some nice brown bread with strawberry jam on it. It was so good that he had another piece with peanut butter. Smiling sweetly, Johnny said, "Thank you, Mother, for my nice brown bread." "Don't thank me, Johnny," said his mother. "Thank the baker. He made the bread. I got it at the bakery just this morning." Over at the bakery, Johnny said, "Thank you, Mr. Baker, for my nice brown bread." "Don't thank me, son," said the baker. "Thank the miller. He ground the wheat to make the flour I use in my bread." At the mill by the river, Johnny said, "Thank you, Mr. Miller, for my nice brown bread." "Don't thank me," said the miller. "Thank the farmer. He grew the wheat which I grind in my mill to make flour." Over in the farmyard, Johnny said, "Thank you, Mr. Farmer, for my nice brown bread." "Don't thank me," said the farmer. "Thank the sun. Without the sunshine, my wheat would not have grown in the fields, and I couldn't have sold it to the miller to grind into flour." Look into the blue sky, Johnny said, "Thank you, Mr. Sun, for my nice brown bread." "Don't thank me," said the sun. "Give thanks to God. I wouldn't be shining on the farmer's fields if God hadn't made me." Johnny took off his hat and bowed his head in prayer. And this is what he said: "Thank you, God, for everything, for the flowers and the birds that sing. Thank you for the sky above. Thank you, God, for your great love. Thank you, God, for everything, for the flowers and the birds that sing. Thank you for the sky above. Thank you, God, for your great love."